Welcome back, venturers. It's time for another discussion about VNs. I am Amar, and together with Taurus, we want to talk about all those mesmerizing moments that took us by surprise. Hey, this character can't be this cute. For today's topic about Gap Moe, we invented the resident Super Moe Master, as well as friend of the channel. Welcome back to the podcast, Ange.
Hey, yeah, it's always good to be here. It has been a while, and yeah, I'm definitely ready to talk about seeing the differences of how Heroine acts when they have a particularly wide gap in their gap moe.
Yes, that's one of the things that obviously we should start off by examining. Just what is gap moe? Gap moe is a sort of anime term, and it mostly revolves around the contrast between two elements of a character that serves to highlight that moe part of them, that cuteness, that the cuteness where you just want to protect them. You want to protect that smile. And so, Ange, you'd say like the most common is the classic of you have a tsundere kind of character who seems to be brash or a little rough around the edges, and then you see an unexpectedly cute moment. And that difference is what really hits the viewer harder, right?
Yeah, I'd say like at a very basic level, that's like the easiest way to describe gap moe. Like I don't know, there's the amount of like crazy like tsundere examples I could think of is off the charts, right? But although she's not like the most generic tsundere, I think there's a reason Rin Tosaka is like the poster child of tsunderes on TV tropes, like this kind of weird site that talks about tropes. But regardless, like the idea is she starts off like really cold, really I don't know, like easy to anger around the main character Shiro, because to be fair, he does stupid stuff. But then eventually, when she warms up to him, that's when she starts showing like more softer side, more, especially in her route, shows more blushy stuff. Yeah, that's because it's the unexpected factor. Like, ooh, this tough girl who like only knows how to, I don't know, get angry or like be tough, but then like suddenly gets all emotional or sad or happy or blushy. That's like ooh, I wasn't expecting this, and that's I think that's like the appeal, like that's why people love tsunderes. Like, oh, I want, like it's like that classic meme, like, oh, you can't handle my soon, you can't have my dare, or however that stupid saying goes, right? That's the idea when I think of it.
I was also had a stupid meme in mind where it's that comparison of some video games of like a normal video game as the little stick figure drawing orders some food in a restaurant and the waiter brings them the food and they just eat and they're happy. And then there's like the Dark Souls experience of you order the food and then the waiter comes out and fights you and then you have to get into a big old struggle, and it's several panels of the mess and chaos that ensues, and then you can sit down and take a bite and really savor that meal. That's always what I've had in mind. It's a little silly, I admit, but still, that idea of there are some characters that are always cutesy or moe, that whole dere aspect. But then there's something else to be said of the moe gap, of when you see that little bit of cuteness in a character you didn't expect it from, and that just intensifies the feeling.
I mean, the way you guys brought up the examples, right? Most likely with tsundere being the most classical character that showcases two sides of them. Whose perspective matters for the gap moe? That's probably my example of examining a bit more advanced example of gap moe. One of the pictures that you are running in the background is taken from Sayano Uto, which I feel like fits the criteria of gap moe, but not necessarily in the usual way, because Saya, titular character, acts cutesy for the majority of the time, but we as readers understand that there's something more going on.
There is that air of mystery and danger surrounding her, especially with the background. Saya no Uta, it's through the lens of a main character who is diseased to see the world in just all sorts of hideous gore and entrails and nasty stuff. He views the entire world like this, except for this one mysterious new girl, Saya. And even though, just in a vacuum, Saya is, plenty moe, but it's that contrast between her and the environment that just leads to such the stark contrast between the two elements of the VN that contribute.
Yeah, and then there's the factor of, obviously I won't say for spoilers, but what happens like later on in the story, depending on your taste, one could argue that Saya's personality later on in the story could be just as, if not more of a, I guess, moe appeal to some people than her starting personality. But, that's neither here or there.
So like we were mentioning, there's a few different ways for gap moe to exist. I feel like the stereotypical example is with the tsundere, who the main character catches them in a moment the heroine thought she was alone, and you see her like playing with a stray kitten or something. That's always been like the standout example, and I think that's what most people think of when you first say gap moe, right?
I completely agree. Yeah. Although another natural dera to exhibit the cute moe is the superior kudera, obviously, which is stoic, and for the most part, you don't expect any emotion to be showcased whatsoever. So when you get hit with that smile, it also creates that contrast of someone who is stone-faced, actually exhibiting emotions.
I feel like, there's another form of gap moe is when you have someone with like the opposite traits that you would expect. I mean, so I think you usually see it as a sort of joke. For example, a big burly, muscular dude who looks all tough and scary, and then you find out he's got like a hobby for baking. And he makes like these pretty little pastries with like frosting and stuff, and he just hopes people enjoys. Again, I feel like that's also a sort of gap moe when their outside appearance just does not match their actions. Right? I'd count that.
Absolutely.
That's why I also posed a question at what perspective also matters. Does it have to be perspective of the characters, or the protagonist, main character, or do we count map Goa to be created from the perspective of a reader, detached from the protagonist? An example I brought is from recently often quoted by me. Galzu Island has one character that protagonist never sees the quote-unquote evil side. She only acts cutesy about him, but you, as the reader, see her nefarious side and how she's plotting something bigger. That creates gap moe in a character, despite protagonist never experiencing that gap moe, ever.
Interesting.
Does that count?
I would think so. I think it's plenty dramatic at the very least. How you get to see that other side of that character, right? That hidden side.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What do you think, Ange?
I was thinking about that because usually in my mind the idea is like the gap moe is the protagonist sees the, I guess we can call the contrast in real time with the reader, but then like if the heroine or whatever is doing this contrast away from the protagonist, but the reader still sees it. So I guess in a way it's like a gap moe, like just for the reader, which I guess in a way still works, since it's at the end of the day that's what gap moe is for. Yeah, I was also thinking of I guess we can call reverse gap moe. Yeah, because you said, as we said, like the default gap moe is usually like the heroine has like a strong or aloof personality, but then like they show their more what you call softer, more emotional side later, which creates a gap moe with like a good contrast, right? But then another type of like reverse gap moe is like so usually like when you have like a shy girl in visual novels, usually a lot of times they're pretty straightforward, like they might open up a little bit, but there are some cases where like a shy girl will like actually like once you actually get to know them, like she's like you find out she's like a secretly assertive, like super loving, like girl, like one that you wouldn't expect from someone who like before was just more meek, quiet, like maybe even afraid of guys, right? Like I was when I was thinking of this specific example, I was thinking of someone called Sugumi from this moege called The Love Rabel. It's not translated fully yet, but I was able to read it. But it has that wholesome, funny moege tone, and I think she that's like one of the first more recent examples I can think of where I'm like a shy girl, like having that good contrast, like even in the common route, like part of her thing is like having development where like the protagonist like helps her out of her shell, and it turns out what was hidden in that shell was like I don't know, a secret. What do you call it? Like a secret assertive girl that you just wouldn't expect from like someone with like with that kind of meek personality. So I think stuff like that can also be a pretty effective contrast gap moe, even compared to like the usual opposite where it's like the angry or tough girl that goes into the softer side, right? So that's another examples I was thinking of.
The moment you brought that up, a more extreme version of that, maybe you agree, would be a yandere then. Someone who normally acts cutesy until she finds her target, so to speak, and then you have the gap. And she's very assertive.
Because, in that vein, a lot of people have that image of tsunderes, that they're normally prickly and brash and, cold against, I guess you could say the main character. And yet the more you get to know them, the more they warm up and you start to see the softer side. But you can also have tsunderes, which are the opposite way, which, seem very cutesy and outgoing and charming on the outside, and then the more the main character gets familiar, the more they can show their like inner self of like, being generally disgruntled or maybe more brash or, whatnot, being more casual since they're on, more familiar terms instead. And I think in some senses that's another case of gap moe, because instead of the opposite, it's still, you're seeing that stark contrast between the characters, and that's what counts. That's what makes that character so much more appealing, when you get that heavy contrast to really highlight how cute she can be. And then on the other hand, I think what might be my favorite is when you have just completely like dere characters in the beginning, like Luna from Virtue's Last Reward. And you just have her in a very ridiculous scenario, in taking up a role that she's not at all suited for. And then you get that little bit of awkwardness of someone like trying to be villainous or, ooh, I am scary. I know on the thumbnail you went and put a horror movie mask on top of Luna. And I think that's another case of gap moe. It's like you see this total sweetheart who is now, look at me, I'm terrifying. And again, it's that contrast. It's that almost comical difference that really hits you in the heart.
That's actually well put. That kind of comical difference. Again, initially, and probably the most basic way people view gap moe is the cutification, so to speak. So someone who hasn't exhibited cute behavior becomes cute, but the opposite also rings true. someone who was cutesy now shows their fangs, or at least tries to and fails, and that's also a contrast in it of itself.
Yeah, like like a kind of another example of like kind of similar to a character who's kind of like usually static but just has to be put in like a funny situation, right? Like, so there's this character, she's not on like the rotating pictures, but Criminal Border by by Purplesoft. There's this like really quiet, I don't even know if I guess she's blunt. I guess she's kudere, but she doesn't have like the standard kudere development, right? She's pretty much just as is. She's kind of like a bodyguard kind of thing. Like she's kind of a say it how it is of if I need to like beat up somebody because like the person I'm protecting is in trouble, then I'll beat him up, or I'll beat up like, or I'll like be super violent on like to protect my allies or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then like her gap moe point is she's like super obsessed with sweets. Like, so it's like a few like SDs that are like meant as like comedy scenes where it's like to like, I don't know, get on her good side, right? Like, okay, like how do I get you to do this? Like, oh, buy me like X sweets from this sweet shop from, I don't know, down the street or something, and get me like this specific type, and then like shows her like eating it like in a very cutesy way, which is like really different from like how she usually acts. But then like that's it. Like otherwise, like outside of like scenes like that, she's like more or less just very blunt kudere. But it's just like those specific moments that like are just like come here or there. Like, oh, okay, yeah, even someone like her can have her random moe moments that are a good contrast to how she usually is.
Oh,
Because you brought an example of a stoic or overall serious character having a weakness be super exaggerated, and that creates that gap. More.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, here is an interesting question I want to pose to you all. Which is better? Those gap moe moments, or just a character, a heroine who's always dere? Which of the two do you prefer more?
I feel like
Okay.
With the deres, it's easier to fall into trodden archetypes. On average, it's easier to have something with my gut reaction being, I've read it already. This is so stereotypical. I feel like with gap moe, and again, on average, you can fuck up both, to be honest. But on average, it requires a little bit more setup, and it can take you by surprise, which in turn creates more memorable characters. So probably, I lean slightly towards the gap moe. Then again, I love kuderes, and I fight for that blush, okay? That smile. It keeps me going.
Yeah, I guess I'm like in that kind of opposite boat of MR where like I do agree both could easily be screwed up, and at the same time both could be great. And don't get me wrong, I mean that's what the point of this episode. Some of the gap moe I listed, it's like some of the more amusing or more memorable ones. Like even I'll admit I'm not the biggest tsundere fan on average, but when they're done well, they can hit me hard, and a good tsundere can possibly have top favorite character. But I guess I would slightly lean towards I don't know, I guess Dere's kind of extreme. I guess more I'll say like more static-ish characters. Like some girls you kind of just know who they are like 90% of the time. Like they'll just act themselves is more appealing to me on average, because like I outside like maybe specific glow and self, like okay, it's like a kind of a comfy feeling knowing like, okay, this is the girl's just going to be exactly like this, or she'll be her dumb goofy way or her openly affectionate way, or nice or whatever. And I sometimes I just need a consistent nice girl on the side, like, and then that's like a comfort thing for me, I guess.
Interesting. So there's that idea of familiarity and reading a visual novel as a comfort activity, right?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it was just funny when I was thinking of ideas for this episode, where I was like, man, a lot of my favorite girls are like really on that more that static e side, where like I can't just list my favorite characters because a lot of them are kind of just they are kind of they are what they are, and I guess in a way I kind of like that about my favorite girls. But yeah, like I said, I can appreciate a really good Gatmoy, especially when they make a big difference and they go against and they can make me, someone who's generally not a tsundere fan, make me really like very specific tsundere. So
Yeah, but if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense if you prefer less flippant characters and characteristics. Because if you like weird girls, you don't want Gapmo or Surprise being, you know what, they actually pretty normal. They aren't weird. Like, what? That could ruin the character you like.
I don't know if there's going that as far as to say that, though.
Yeah, I mean, weird girls can sometimes have like some degree of Gatmoy, but I get what you're saying. Yeah, if they're like, yeah, if like the idea is like they act different from like other girls, but then like they're like, oh I want to specifically just be like any other normal girl, then like depending on how it's done, they can just be, or yeah, just be any other girl. I'm like, well, then they're not special anymore, I guess. I don't know.
Oof.
You don't want your favorite girls to be unweirded, okay?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't want them to be so weird that they're just like unhinged or crazy, but I want to be part of why their appeal is because they're different, right? That's how I see it. And that could mean that they kind of have to like kind of stick to their I don't know, their gimmicks or whatever, but I don't know, I'm like, well, that's why I love them to begin with, so I don't see a problem. Usually for the ones I like, of course, assuming I like them.
Ooh, that's rough. The ones you don't like, I imagine that hurts even harder, because you're like, oh, the potential. Oh, I was looking forward to her. No.
Yeah, but, that could also apply to, Gatmoy characters, right? There could be, like, some where, like, man, this tsundere could be really good, but it's just too bad she's just too much of a bitch when she's soon. But, like, is it really worth to go through all that for the dere? I don't know about this one.
Harsh. But for me, in the face of this question, I honestly think I would have to go for the dere characters to begin with. Because yes, don't get me wrong, the Gatmoe stuff is nice, and that is sweet, but when you could simply have a very heartwarming, kind character like Luna, or like, say, Kasumi from Love Love Extra, it's like, think of all those moments, all of the typical character bonding that you don't have to, in a sense, fight through to get to the good stuff. And some people's tastes are different. Some people like all of those, other character building moments. To be honest, Chris from Machikoi is a great example in my book, because, Chris's route was very sweet. Chris and main character, they are often at odds at each other the entire time, and then you just get some very romantic moments in Chris's route, and it's very sweet. It's definitely like the highlight of her route in the original Machikoi. But when you contrast that with some of the other dere characters you see in visual novels, it's like, oh, I can't give that up. I gotta go with those to begin with. You get too much good stuff all throughout every time you see them, instead of just waiting for the goal at the end.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Remind me, which nurse was your favorite in Nopeverse?
Hey, let's keep the whole Nope series separate from this. I don't think it really counts.
You put that picture here, okay?
That was that, and this is this.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. In fact, it's funny that you bring up nurses, because there's another, visual novel nurse series, Nurse Love Addiction. And that one, again, the common route is very sweet when we just get to see the main character living their, slice of life segments with the pretty music and the wonderful art and the struggle for the main character to learn nursing in the common route. There were some, moe gap moments with some of the characters, but like I said, just sticking with the siblings and the childhood friends, whatnot, that was the sweet stuff. And then as far as nurse content goes.
I'll trust our resident nurse expert on that, okay?
Oh, is that what I've become?
Yeah.
Take it.
Oh no. What kind of expert would you be, Ange?
I mean, I feel like I'm like the weird girl expert at this point. Like I literally, I don't want to say I made up the term, but I feel like I can't think of anyone who specifically has said I like weird girls as much as I have. Like, I don't know. So I think that's why I'm like, that's why maybe I'm like, kind of in agreement with you, or like, kind of like more characters who have less focused on gap and more on like it's the specific type of thing, and that weird girls kind of fit that specific type of thing. So I'm like, I guess that's me being my expert on that, I guess.
And it's very much appreciated.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts, Amar?
Not really. That was an interesting introspective when it comes to gap moe as a concept, realizing characters. I feel like, how can I say it? Gap moe can exist even, I feel like, in, I don't want to say readers, but then again, if I'm the expert that's like you guys are from nurses and weirdo girls, I like my dark fantasy. It's so weird for me to glaze Necopara, right? Isn't that weird gap moe as well?
You mentioned dark fantasy and immediately mentioned Necopara. That was a very funny visual.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Necopara doesn't like a good example of like a modern series that doesn't really have too much gap moe. Like all the girls are really like the closest is probably like what's her face, Azuki maybe, but like even then,
Azuki, Maple, those two are the tsunderish, and that's the closest you get to the gap moe.
Yeah, but they're like not like maybe misremember. I don't remember them being like super contrasted. Like they were still like pretty straightforward. But I guess because I was trying to think of like VN's recent, like I don't think there's not a lot of, I guess, classic style tsunderes even in visual novels, like at least from what I read in like the last decade or so. Like feels like they're trying to, I don't know, have more like less trope, well, at least in my experience, a little bit less tropey characters, I guess, which is good, but then it also makes it hard to find like, the classic gap moe outside like maybe your random moe gay where like, they know people want like tsunderes or like but yeah, it seems like they've had to like get more creative with gap moe because gap moe itself is not going away. People love contrasting. That's why tsunderes were so popular for so long. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't want to like get too repetitive,
too obvious,
like the exact same tsunderes. They're all just be like, I've seen this all like so much back in the 2000s. I don't need to whatever.
For some people the 2000s feel like yesterday, but let's remember that's 20 years old now at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
time flies.
I don't miss when gap moe included the girl beating up the protagonist. I'm really glad.
Oh God!
At the very least, that one has like calmed down a lot. Like because that's not necessarily limited to tsunderes. Like just beating up the protagonist just for like a comedic gimmick, I just got kind of sick of. So
the slapstick. The slapstick physical comedy? No?
Yeah, like it was fine for a while, but then maybe I watched too much anime. So I saw too much. Like
the anime was notorious for that, especially how undeserving oftentimes the protagonist got smacked down. I feel like to contrast that, I a title like Movlove did it so much better because you had childhood friends that were play fighting, so to speak, between themselves, both ways. Whereas in anime, oh my god, jeez. Don't get me started. You know what? No.
It's very often like the main character walks in and the girl changing, even though it wasn't locked and she didn't say anything, and then she gets mad and it just beats the crap out of him.
Oh my god. No.
You're right though. Muv-Luv Extra was a lot better about it because there was so much more, give and take between the two. They both beat the stuffing out of each other.
But in a weird way, it's actually a good example of gap moe because Sumika is. I love Sumika, but she is not a deep character by any means. Like her affections are very straightforward, but like I think that's like a good example of like
True.
Unique childhood friend gap moe because like it's like they're like I mean MR called them play fighting, but let's be real, they're like mutually abusive.
Okay, fair enough.
Like they beat like Takeru when non-fights Takeru just punched the crap out of Sumika for like no reason, and then of course Sumika punching him to the moon like so unnecessary. But then like once you get into like closer to her romance route, and then she gets like actually affectionate, and they do the whole childhood friends to lovers awkwardness thing. Like even like just simple childhood friend like awkwardness to lovers can have a gap moe appeal, even though Sumika herself doesn't really change much. She just gets like okay, my actual romantic feelings are coming out, not just my how much are we going to beat each other up over stupid things. In fact,
No, yeah, it's a classic where there's a sprite of Sumika in a dress, and she looks very pretty, and it's like, and then Mr. Main Character is all like, oh my gosh, I've never really realized that about you before, and that's the classic, the whole childhood friend of just suddenly seeing her in a new light. Like, that's exactly, gap moe as well. It's classic. But yeah, so we've gone all over with this sort of topic. Thank you very much for sticking around with us, Ange, and it's always a pleasure to have you on board.
Oh
no, the pleasure's all mine. I always love being on here.
Thanks, Ange, for joining in. And thanks all our listeners for tuning in. And please tell us your favorite gap moe in visual novels. And for that, venture out.
Venture out.